Welcome to Not Entirely Unlike Tea with Christine Collins. Hey there, it's Christine Collins. Today I have a fun little topic around what types of traits and characteristics actually make for the best practitioners and the best therapeutic relationships. And this is true whether it's business or personal capacity. One of the key things that we look for is centered around their experience, their training, perhaps if they're using a specific type of approach or modality, or the types of outcomes that they advertise as being inherent in working together with them. But today, I think it's really important to highlight some of the things that don't often get described that I think are vital in any type of relationship working together with a coach or mentor or therapist. Research around this topic from actually analyzing success in a relationship between a practitioner or a mentor or a coach and their client. And one of the single most important factors is a characteristic known as unconditional positive regard. So this is a client-centered Rogerian concept. And this has to do with the client experiencing being both unconditionally accepted and unconditionally valued by their coach or counselor or therapist, is highly associated with positive outcomes from coaching and higher treatment success. And what it means is that the therapist, coach, or counselor or mentor continuously and persistently views their client with the unconditional positive regard, meaning that they have a positive view of the client regardless of what things might get talked about, the moments at which the client may become frustrating to work with, differences of opinion, and or the client sharing something that might not be commonly acceptable to the public or to other people. So throughout the course of the relationship, the therapist or coach is capable of maintaining this unconditional positive view of the client throughout, so that the client is continuously affirmed in who they are, in their value, and in their opinion of them. And tied closely to this unconditional positive regard is a sense of empathy and a sense of congruence. Empathy is the mentor or coach's capability of understanding the client's perspective and being sympathetic towards it. So it's kind of twofold. It's being capable of grasping it, getting it, not being puzzled or confused by the client, but really making an effort to understand the client's worldview, their lived experience, and their perspective, and also treating it with the same unconditional positive regard and acceptance. That does not necessarily mean that the coach or therapist agrees with everything the client thinks or says or believes. Not at all. The difference is that they are capable of holding space for that person with a level of empathy that affirms that person regardless. And that there is a genuine, authentic effort to understand where the client is coming from. The congruence part of it has to do with the coach or mentor or therapist's authenticity, their capacity to be genuine, to interact in the relationship in a genuine and authentic way. So I think that last piece is very useful in clarifying that it's not necessarily a relationship in which the client just says whatever they want and the coach or therapist just consistently agrees with them. It's not that they agree with them. In fact, based on the congruence aspect, they may disagree, they may choose to present an alternative view or an alternative opinion in order to discuss it with the client. But what's different about that and just sheerly disagreeing or sheerly presenting those opposing concepts is that the unconditional positive regard never goes away. So it's very much, here's a different view, here's a different idea, but I still like you, still care about you, and I'm still empathetic to your situation specifically. And so their presentation of ideas, their congruence, maybe sometimes bring up a different worldview, does not correlate with creating a sense of criticism or shame or disregard for the client's lived experience and beliefs. And the importance of this factor exists in any type of relationship where someone is trying to make positive change, to strive towards success, or to strive towards becoming something more, towards doing something more than what they previously have. And it is one of the key predictors in success, regardless how effective the tools and skills and strategies of the coach or mentor or therapist are. The unconditional positive regard, the ongoing empathy and congruence within the relationship is much more relevant than the specific skills and traits and knowledge. Not to minimize those things, but in the ranking, the unconditional positive regard ranks the highest. Without having that as part of the relationship, it is very challenging for the client to actually relax enough into a space of trusting where they can genuinely and truly open up to discuss the real problems that they're having and therefore to find solutions for them. If they don't receive that sense of unconditional positive regard, they may remain more careful, more guarded, therefore be less open, less honest in order to protect themselves from the potential critical opinion of the coach or therapist, or even the perceived criticism if it has not yet been expressed. Sometimes people pick up on energies and personalities and what feels okay to say and what doesn't. And so it is the role of the therapist or coach or mentor to clearly and consistently convey their determination to have this unconditional positive regard for their client. And to ensure that that is communicated not only verbally, but in their responses to what the client says. I think to add another layer to this, it's really important when searching out a practitioner or a coach or mentor or a therapist or a counselor of some kind to have a look at the types of characteristics that generally seem to work for you personally, because it may not be the same for everyone. And in particular, in relation to this characteristic, I think it's really valuable to look at the support structure around the person that already exists and what type of incoming messages are they consistently receiving. Now, for many people, it's a mixture where they're going to have some people in their lives who may seem very supportive and friendly, whether that's friends or family or partner, or perhaps colleagues and coworkers. So that group of people who they generally have positive interactions with and receive positive feedback from. However, there are some people who primarily receive criticism. So we would be talking about clients who are in difficult or precarious family situations, partner situations, work situations, where they are plagued by consistent, unconstructive criticism coming from, it may be a boss, it may be a partner, it may be a family or extended family member, and doubly so if it's coming at them from more than one source. So at home, they have a negative, controlling, dominating, critical partner. At work, they have a challenging boss. Maybe they don't like their coworkers or their job or the work that they're doing. Or they have multiple people in their family that they have challenging or strained relationships with for one reason or the other. And in addition to that, they don't have a lot of support from perhaps coworkers, friends, or other people around them. In those situations, I think it's even more critical that the client is able to source working with someone who will give them the unconditional positive regard. Sometimes there is an opinion that people need tough love, or people need, a kick in the bum in order to get them moving closer towards their goal. And there are a lot of practitioners, coaches, mentors, and the like who have built businesses on that and done it successfully, and their clients are satisfied with that. And so that's why I bring up this distinction, because while that may not be my personal preference, I think that what's more important is what's useful and valuable to the client. So if we have a client who overall has a good, solid amount of healthy and positive support around them, in other words, they're getting positive feedback, praise, and the criticism is relatively low. They do maybe get some occasional criticism from their loved ones or, their job or something like that. But for the most part, they're getting positive reinforcement from the people around them. Then I think it would be emotionally safe for them to work with someone who might be a little bit direct. But when you have someone who is surrounded by just about nothing but criticism, their self-esteem is in shreds, they feel consistently torn down by the people around them, I think that it is really extra double, triple important that they seek out someone who has that little bit more compassionate, empathetic appeal. And this can change over the course of a lifespan. I made the mistake once many years ago of trying to work with someone who landed more along the tough love route. And within 2 minutes of meeting me, she had made it up in her mind that what I needed was extremely painful, brutal honesty, extremely direct, and unusually uncomfortable insight and feedback. And she hadn't yet even heard what my situation was, which at the time was very difficult, with very little support around me, which is why I was seeking support. And that should have been one of the first questions. What is your support system like? Because at that time, I didn't really have one at all. So when you have a person who's in that position, their self-esteem is in tiny little pieces, maybe they've lost their sense of self, they had made so many sacrifices and accommodations for other people, the last thing they need, the very last thing they need, is another harsh, critical voice in their head telling them about themselves in all kinds of negative ways. And so it's really important to know going into a therapeutic or coaching relationship, what type of relationship you actually need. Sometimes that's more important even than the type of support. Another key characteristic in a really healthy coaching relationship is going to be protection of privacy. And this extends, to me, far beyond simply not sharing that person's records or notes and keeping those things locked down somewhere safe behind a password or a lock of some kind. I think that protection of privacy needs to go into conversations that are had. Now, in the formal counseling and therapy world, there are lots of laws anyway, where you're not allowed to discuss a client. Should someone call and ask, hey, are you working with this client? You can't even answer that question. You can neither confirm nor deny it. So there are a lot of realms where regulations are in place to protect privacy. So I don't necessarily mean those. I'm talking about the more informal relationships that people tend to strike up, where they sign up to work with a coach online, they come across someone in their mutual newsfeed, and they begin a coaching relationship of some kind that is not necessarily bound by the same strict confidentiality that you might find in the medical world. And this is where the integrity of the coach in protecting privacy is so important. The client's situation shouldn't be discussed with anyone else. There are some instances where there's some kind of a supervisor-coach relationship, or the coach is being guided by someone, perhaps their own mentor, where they might discuss some client cases, but I still think that confidentiality should apply to the identity of the person, unless there's an agreement with the client about that. And anything beyond that, such as the coach and the client both belong to a peer group, or they run in some of the same circles and know some of the same people, that practitioner, coach, or mentor should never be discussing the plight of that client or their situation or their private matters out with anyone else. They shouldn't really be discussing it with their partner or their friends, even when they are not sharing the name, but most especially the name and the details of the client. I also don't love when I see someone sharing on social media about a story in which they don't name a person, but they are sharing their story and they are sharing details of their story. depending on the level of detail that they get into, if it could potentially be traced back to the person, I think that is definitely a privacy violation as well. And so the types of things that can be done to protect privacy are things like, if there's a conversation around testimonials, for example, there are many situations in which the client themselves would like to provide the testimonial. If they choose to do that, then that is completely their right to do so. But I think it's also really valuable to offer them the opportunity to either be anonymous or to use a different name. Many clients will feel conflicted between their desire to help the coach and to share what a great person they are and how useful their work is, and the desire to not be known by everybody that they needed help for something. And obviously this depends in part upon the nature of the coaching relationship and what they went in for support with. But regardless, they are entitled to their privacy. And so it's important that that is offered. I would also say a peer attitude, meaning that the coach or therapist or mentor is not better, is not looking down on the client. It's not adult and child. It's peer and peer. It's two adults who have chosen to work together through some type of formal relationship, a paid relationship, but one individual paying another individual should not mean that the power dynamic becomes imbalanced and that the client is somehow lower or lesser than the coach. If we continue to look at the relationships with our clients as being sacred, it becomes a sacred relationship in which both people are sacred and their feelings, needs, value, and their meaning, their worldview is equally relevant and equally important. And it's not about the coach knows it all and has it figured out and is guiding the poor, silly client along the way to something better. It's more so that one individual has a specific set of skills to help the other individual through a challenge. It's recognized simultaneously that the client has skills and value that the coach does not have. So both parties enter with the understanding that the relationship is sacred and that they are equal and that they both have value and skills and important characteristics that are valuable that just may be different. And in this situation, one is sharing their skills and their value with the other. That's not to say the coach can't also learn and grow in that coaching relationship as well. So that is a small handful of the things that I would recommend focusing on. That does not mean that I have all the answers either. It's really more to give you something to think about and to reflect on for yourself as you enter coaching relationships of various different forms. You are the practitioner, the mentor, the coach, or the client on the receiving end. It's important for us to think through these things so that we can design the best possible experience for ourselves and for others. I hope you found this helpful, and until we meet again, I wish you the most magical and creative rest of your day. Thanks for listening. This is Christine Collins at transformcreate.com.